Hey, it's your girl Key, and I'm here tonight talking about whether you're someone who goes with your head or you're someone that goes with your heart. And as always, right before I go live, I have a technical challenge, but that's okay. Your girl here is able to deal with it because it's a gift in life. And so the reason I'm doing this topic, do you go with your head or do you go with your heart, is because it's a massive issue that impacts on our relationship and the quality of our relationships. And so it's really important because so many times people come to me and they think things just happen to them. And often when we think things just happen to us, we can become a victim and we don't actually see how we may well kind of like feed into our difficult circumstance, or we think, like I said before, we think things just happen. And actually, I'm of the view that it's always about me taking responsibility. It's always about me looking into myself to see actually what part did I play. And one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate of that is because I believe in the importance of self-responsibility, because then I'm able to make, should I choose to, depending on what I discover about myself, is it empowers me to make other choices. So for one, I don't repeat the same patterns again. Or at least, even if I don't repeat the pattern again, it may mean that I stop repeating that pattern. And I think in the realm of intimate relationships, that is particularly important because as I'm a massive advocate, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our niceness. And if we're not prepared to do that, or if we want to blame Fred, John and Harry for the difficult things that have happened to us, then I think the reality is that we will feel like a victim, because there's value in being a victim. When you're a victim, things happen to you, and you can then, what do they say? One finger points out at that person, but there's three fingers pointing back at you. And so, like I said before, like the benefit of that is that we don't have to take self-responsibility. So if you're someone who wants to blame Fred and you want to wax lyrical about how Fred did this to you and did that to you, then it's probably best you, this live is not going to be in your interest, and you might benefit from other groups or videos where we just moan about something that's happened to us. Whereas what I'm always about, which I think can be tricky, especially if you're someone who does denial, is I'm always about us looking into ourselves to think about, how did I play into that situation? What did I do that meant that I was also a part of it? And like I said, I think some of the resistance around that is because either people are in denial, or they do avoidance, or they're wedded to being a perpetual victim. And I think the people that benefit most from working with me are people who are curious, who are open to kind of thinking, that person did me wrong. We don't deny that, but we also get curious about how we may have also played into that. And so one thing I'm advocate about, I write about this in my book, Why Love Hurts and Why Self-Love is the Key. I'm a massive advocate of auditing our phones. Yes, it's really important we audit our phones because our lives are often in our phones. And so if you can scrutinize that, you might see, oh yeah, I do contact that person after I've been out on a Friday night and had a couple of drinks, and actually I have to take responsibility for that action because that action is a part of the problem. But when I link this back to whether you're someone who goes with your head or your heart, if you're a heart person, it often means that we can be impulsive, we go with our feelings, and that is a wondrous thing, and it may mean that you've had some quite intense relationships. Thank you for the thumbs up. Boom, boom. Good to know I'm not alone out here. And I will be taking your questions, so please put them below. Knowing whether you're someone who's heart or head led is really important for our self-knowledge, especially if with someone who's been in relationship after relationship where it's not gone our way, we've been used, abused, hurt, left, and we're like baffled. How can being loving and caring and kind keep continuously resulting in us being left on our own? And if what I'm saying speaks to you, or if you're curious about being a heart-led person or a head-led person, feel free to send me your questions, because then I'm going to interact with you, and I know what I'm like. I get more animated and more excited with that. So I'm passionate about helping you to understand that process, because that is where, when we become self-aware, which is what, thank you for the thumbs up, I need that. Let me know you're out there. That's where we can make different choices, because we can catch ourselves. So we turn the light on inwards, so we catch ourselves. And what I'm going to talk about first is being a heart-led person, because that's the lane I slay in, because that's what has often resulted in me getting myself into sticky situation in intimate relationships. And it's something that I really have to be mindful of, because emotions can be very strong. And even though in your logical mind, I always point to the frontal cortex. Let's just look here, you're educated. You can say educated stuff, like I point to the frontal cortex, because that's where apparently, according to theory at the moment, that's where the rational sense-making part of our brain is. Our emotions can compromise the rational decision-making part of our brain when we're flooded with emotion. And that is often a reason why, and I'm very keen to explain this kind of like neuroscience element to my clients, why we sometimes go back into situations when we know like it's not good for us, but we go back into those situations because often we're being pulled by our emotions. So if that speaks to you and you're someone who keeps going back into a situation where you know in your heart of hearts, I love that word, heart of hearts, it's not good for you, then actually it's highly likely that your decision-making process is being governed by your emotions, which is why you're sometimes baffled by yourself. Now, if that makes sense to anybody out there, give your girl Key a thumbs up, because like I said before, it's really helpful to know, you know, I'm not alone. Let me just check this one. And emotions are very powerful. Emotions are very strong. And if you're in the dark about that, if you're still thinking that things just happen to you and you can't like fathom why, if you baffle yourself in terms of why do you continuously go back to situations where you know it's not healthy for you, then it's highly likely that your emotions are governing your decisions. Now, if you're someone who's very headstrong, then you're going to be coming from a very rational place about your intimate relationships. And actually, sometimes, not all the time, but that rational sense-making place can be a very interesting, in terms of intimate relationships, because you won't be led by your emotions. And sometimes people who are emotional may find you cold, they may find you difficult, or they may get fed up with the 101 questions that you keep on asking them. So sometimes, not all the time, head-led people can be very rational, and they're not someone who's going to be impulsive. They're not going to throw caution to the wind with you. They're not going to just elope or run away and do something that you think would be of great importance to you. It will have to be on their terms. And so if that's something you kind of like would like for yourself, then that's cool. But sometimes there can be a conflict between rational people when they're dealing with people who can be very heart-led, because we kind of live in the moment. We'll fret about that tomorrow, and whilst living in the moment can be a wonderful thing, it can also lead to a whole raft of problems in the realm of like regrets. You kind of, you know, especially like thinking about Carnival, which was yesterday, sometimes it can lead to looking back on behaviours and thinking like, man, I wish I hadn't made that decision. But you were caught up in the moment and you went with your feelings, and you may have ended up getting yourself into a pickle because you were purely heart-led. And so there's an absolute benefit to being heart-led. You can love intensely, you can be spontaneous, you're very emotional, but in the realm of often, well, thinking about, thank you, Lily, I appreciate that. In the realm of intimate relationships, or if you're dealing with someone who's narcissistic, which could often be very tricky for people who are heart-led, not all the time. Maybe that's my own bias because of my own experiences. It may result in you really struggling to like make rational decisions. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so like passionate about talking about this subject. It's also a topic that I explore in my workshop, which is coming up on the 28th of September, called Feel Loved. I'm passionate about helping people to understand these dynamics. I'll put a link to the event below because they have incredible bearing on our intimate relationships. And so whilst, you know, I'm a massive promoter of change, give thanks for the thumbs up. Good to see you out there, Lily. Lily, if you have any questions, do let me know. So while I'm most passionate about you honoring your authenticity, who you are, I also think it is prudent, I love that word, that you are very much conscious of the fact that there is also benefits, very important benefits to being heart-led, but there are also drawbacks that we need to be aware of, especially if just going with our heart, going with our emotions has been our default and it's caused us issues. And if that speaks to you, if you're curious about why you keep repeatedly getting yourself into similar situations where your emotions lead you and you're not able to make rational, sensible decisions, even though you know best, and you're like, why do I keep doing that? And you're baffled and life's getting tricky. Because if I think about, and I am a massive fan of self-disclosure, not because I want to keep talking about my historic situations. Yeah, somebody said to me recently, oh, you're talking about, and it's like, look, I talk about that because it's not because I'm living in my past or trying to punish some ex for how they treated me, you know, when I wasn't woke. Like that is like very low level for myself. The reason is one, it's because it's my experience, and because I've been able to use that experience to my advantage in terms of developing a career. But that can be the challenge when you're perpetually heart-led, is that you can keep repeating situations, or often, sadly, we can end up staying in situations where we know it's not good for us. And that can be very difficult. That can lead us into all types of like difficult situations. And because I am also a mother, and because my well-being has far-reaching tentacles, it's essential that I am looking after myself, and you are looking after yourself too out there in your intimate relationships. This is one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate of getting to understand more about whether we go with our head or our heart. And all these are topics that I address in my workshop, with the ambition to get people to wake up. Now, like I said before, if you are a perpetual victim, if you want to still blame Fred from the 90s who treated you poorly, then it's highly unlikely that you'll struggle with my kind of like way of being just very real and sometimes very raw about that. And I will warn people about that. Like, I'm Marmite, I'm not for everybody. But if you are curious and you believe that the way I deliver my material is inspiring and like the truth is not always comfortable, then potentially you would benefit from attending my workshop where I explore this in much more detail. And so if that would be of benefit to you, like, I'll put a link below to my upcoming workshop. But the challenge, I think one of the challenges with being purely like either heart-led or head-led is that so being heart-led means that sometimes we don't take the time out. Lily, if you're with me, give me a thumbs up there. We don't take the time out to kind of pause because we can be so impulsive and just run with our feelings. Is we don't take the time out to think and question the situation we're going into. It's only when things get really sour that we able to like, oh, well, you know what, he did this or he did that, and then you start to, or there was things that I kind of avoided and I ignored. And that usually happens after like a particular like drama, actually. And so what it means is that you're constantly having to learn backwards, and then you're constantly reacting. And if that is a problem for you, if that causes you grief, and then you end up feeling like a right moron because the same pattern repeated itself again and again, then my encouragement to you is think about coming to the Feel Loved workshop, where we'll also be talking about this and how to assist yourself with honoring who you are, honoring the fact that you are someone who's heart-led. So it's not about contorting yourself or making yourself into someone who you aren't, but it's about developing coping strategies to help you mediate that. So Lily, thank you. If you have a question, 100% you like that. It's about learning skills to mediate that so that you honor yourself in terms of, you're someone who's a feeler, but it also may mean you have to fight temptation in order to not just follow head over heels for someone who potentially you haven't had the time out to get to know that person. And so that's where we look at that's where you would benefit from using your head, the rational part of our brains, to start to we have to be like, you know what, Key, we're going to slow right down. We're going to take it easy, because, and why I'm such an advocate, even as a heart-led person who goes with who used to, sounds really sad, like I'm not who I should be, but I used to just go with my feelings and let that take me wherever it took me. But that was highly dangerous for me. So the benefits of learning to engage with my logic is that I can put the brakes and exercise patience in order to get a greater sense of the potential love candidate before me. Because what they say, and I believe this, was often personal is universal. So I'll own this because I know I'm not the only one. There's many of us out there, which is, we have a lot of love to give. And if we get entangled or embroiled in a relationship with a bozo, a user, an abuser, or we get actually attached to somebody through the oxytocins that are produced through sexual intercourse, then those bonds, especially with the oxytocin and the great sex, can be very difficult to break, which is another reason why give your girl a thumbs up, and please ask a question. Not that I'm running out of things to say, because your girl Key can talk to a camera for ages, but I just would love to inspire you in ways that are right on the nub of what might be challenging you. But also, I am very much aware that this is a public forum. So if it would benefit you, please inbox me, because I have my laptop open here. So that's the benefit of asking yourself questions, especially if you're heart-led, is that we get a point to slow down. We slow down, so we're not just saying yes and going full steam ahead. We're taking the time out to learn to exercise patience, and hopefully in that process, well, usually what should be happening, my hope is that this happens for you, is that you get an opportunity to meet with the character in a more rounded sense, especially when the emotional sensitivity is reduced. So if that speaks to you, give your girl a thumbs up. But also, if you are the opposite, now I'm not a rational person. I don't, like, in terms of intimate relationships, I don't come from a rationalized place. But I guess, you know what, I think over the years I've learned to engage my rational, logical, sense making part of my brain in intimate relationships, is that the benefit of that is that you take things slower. You also, like, ask questions, and you appreciate, you know, it's also about appreciating the process. However, if you're a heart-led person and you kind of end up in situations where, how would I put it? You're with somebody who's particularly, he goes with their head. You may feel sometimes that they're particularly cold, they're very cautious, and they move quite slowly. Now, that can create a rub for people who are heart-led, who want to, let's do it now, let's go with it, let's go with our feelings. That can be tricky. But if you're reaching a certain level of maturity and you're growing in yourself and you want to try to do things differently, there's much benefit to that. And so, you know, my encouragement to you is also like why not try something different? Like, you've done it your way, you've done it the way you've done it for years. What's the harm in trying something different in order to potentially, well, one hopes, is to get a different result? Because that's where we truly grow, is when we try something different. And so I hope that speaks to you in terms of, like, trying something different. Because if you're anything like me, in my, when I think of it, it's like my past self, like, or my pre-woke self, let's call it. I never stopped to question myself. I went full throttle into those situations, which often ended up being car wreck situations. That, like, if I'm real about it, and I know what's personal is universal, so I'll say it on behalf of the my silent viewers, on behalf of the people who don't, like, speak up, or who are baffled by this, or who might be watching it on the hashtag replay. Please put a hashtag replay in there for your girl Key. Is that actually you give yourself that opportunity to just slow down, and then there's a massive benefit from that. But the challenge you'll experience if you're a heart-led person and you're starting to exercise slowing down, engaging your head in your intimate relationships, is the pace is going to be far slower. And also, you might have this one, ladies, he's boring. Yeah, that's a big one to look out for. Give me a thumbs up if that speaks to you. Because when we describe or discriminate against a potential recruit because we regard that person as being boring, because, well, what's the opposite of boring? Would be, we want something that's exciting, or we want, well, I hear myself saying the drama, even though we say we don't want the drama. Yet when we meet somebody, you know, boring Bob, who would never ever get any of your time before because you felt that you were too hot or too important to be dealing with somebody like Bob, actually that individual is going to be a real challenge for you. especially if you're a heart-led person and you've gone from, often, not always, but you've gone from mayhem situation to mayhem situation, then there could be a massive benefit to actually giving something different a try. However, in trying something different, what you may realize is you actually come up against your own discrimination towards somebody that's different. And then you might come up with things like, you know, he's a nice guy, but, well, the challenge with that is it's actually in the newness that we grow. When we give ourselves permission, when we go beyond our discrimination of somebody because they're not bad boy Jack, that you may get an opportunity to experience yourself in a different way. And that is, I believe, where the seeds of growth and change happen. However, the issue with that, the challenge with that, is that you have to get out of your own way. And that might actually be very tricky for you because you're used to doing things in a particular way where you go for a certain type, even though you know in your heart of hearts your type is not good for you. And that's a massive thing that I see again and again, is going for our types, especially if you're a heart-led person, because you might like excitement, you might like the thrill, and sometimes I do believe we do like the roller coaster of emotions that we go through when we have those types of relationships. And I remember, and the reason why I'll say that is I can own that, because I remember in my earlier days, I would, like, as I was shifting and moving away from the excitement and the mayhem of it all, the things that I would used to, like, I used to look at my phone and my phone was like, there was nothing happening on my phone. And then I used to feel like my life was becoming boring. Like, wow, like, is that how it is? Like, I can look at my phone and there's nothing happening on it. Like, wow. And that was the change that happened when I was shifting. And that process can be very uncomfortable, because you might have gone from mayhem where your phone's popping off and there's another drama here, there, everywhere. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, as we realize that relationship's not working for us, we do the work on ourselves. I hope you're doing the work on yourself. If you're not, you know that you can get in touch, inbox me, schedule a fact-finding call. That, you know, the process of change, when there was no more drama, I found particularly difficult, and started to kind of well, I don't know if I started to crave it, but I kind of felt like, is this it? You know, where I was used to that mayhem before. And so guys that were like that weren't excitement or weren't full of challenge, I would chastise and call them names. And so if you're someone that does that, and obviously I've learned through my journey that actually that was me rejecting people that could potentially offer a healthy, wholesome relationship. But based on where I was at in that journey, I wasn't able to receive that. Okay, thank you. Okay, is that when you say that's where you're at right now, is that with regards to chastising the safe guys or calling them boring or calling them names? Do let me know, because that is I think it's a very interesting place to be, because I think it's a part of the shift. And when you shift and then we start to call safe, consistent men boring, or he's a bit dry, or I could hear myself a bit, he's nice, but what? He turns up on time, he's a man of his word, he's committed and really likes you and wants to be there for you. Like, who wouldn't want that? But clearly that was something that I actually had a problem receiving. And that was something that really illuminated my issues. And if that kind of speaks to you, if you get it, that transition is very difficult. I believe so. It was difficult for me. And whilst I wasn't keen to reignite I'm that go with the, you know, whilst, what was I, where was I? I think one of the challenges with that, where was I? I was talking about the challenges of, yeah, the challenge of transition was what I experienced was that I would now start to discriminate and call those people names, and that process is a very delicate process, because actually what you're getting access to there is you're getting access to the ways that you reject healthy, wholesome relationships. That's a beautiful example of how I rejected gentlemen who I just was like, I guess I wasn't able to receive that type of healthy, wholesome love. I'm that go with the heart person. How we go fusing time. He can't make up his mind if he Okay, so again, I've just had a question here about you know, being with someone and they can't make up their mind as to whether they want to be with you. Well, the challenge is, if you're with someone who can't make up their mind about if they want to be with you, already I'll know from that situation is that you've given him all the power. So you've given your power away because you're waiting for that individual to make the decisions about your relationship, which means that you are on the back foot. You're gonna have to accept what you get. And I do a video that is one of my favorites anyway, about stop accepting crumbs, because if you're waiting for somebody else to make a decision about your relationship, then clearly you're not making a decision and you have to ingest whatever you're given. And that in itself is a recipe for disaster, and it's a recipe for abuse, because they hold all the keys. They hold all the power. And my encouragement to you is you need to take back the keys so that you have ultimate power over your situation. Because if not, you're just going to have to keep responding, or you're going to have to wait years. You've already put a number down there, and that's a significant amount of years for that person to make up their mind. And the reality is, if they're getting all the goodies, if they're getting everything they want on their terms, then they're actually usually comfortable with the situation as it is. The challenge is you want more, and he's happy to take what's on offer. So that's where we have to be kind of conscious that actually we're teaching people how to treat us. And that's why I go back to the importance of self-responsibility and getting to understand what's going on for us, which is something that we explore at depth in my workshop, Feel Loved. So here, I'm fed up making excuses to my friends. I'm fed up of making excuses to my friends when they say he's no good. Well, the reason why if you have to make excuses, well, the answer's in there. If you're making excuses, I would presume you feel embarrassed, shamed, humiliated, because ultimately what you're not prepared to do is to make a decision about the relationship. What you've done is you've given away all your power to somebody else, and you're waiting for them to make the decision. And in the meantime, the years are going by. Depending on your age, we've also got our biological clocks are ticking. And I don't know if you want to have children, but all of that is a massive factor. And so interestingly, I didn't want to be crass, but I do have a capacity to go there. Hey, bullseye, boom, we love that. Is I've called it head or heart, but I was really thinking about reframing the entire live and calling it head, heart, or genitals, because often also our midriff, we know oxytocins are released when we have sex, which are also a very strong a link to attachment, especially for females. If I'm wrong about that, someone with their infinite wisdom will correct me. If the sex is bombastic and you're attached in that regard, then that also makes it much more tricky to make rational, logical decisions. So we need to be mindful of that too. But as ever, as I know, you know, with from my own personal situation and the many clients that I've worked with over the years, making those decisions can be very tricky. And what also means when we start to make decisions about our relationship status rather than waiting on someone else, is that what we will encounter is usually what we've been fearing. And because we don't want to encounter what we've been fearing, which is that we'll be on our own, that we might feel lonely or we might feel humiliated, what happens is, because we want to avoid those experiences, we hang on, we hold on. And it's highly likely, if you've been waiting for the amount of time you've mentioned, is that you live in hope of how the relationship should be. And like, that fantasy in your mind's eye is what is keeping you holding on. But if also, you know, like, you know, there is no sex involved, it's also likely, I would encourage you to think about what is going on in the relationship. What is the dynamic that has you pulled? What is the dynamic that has you pulled? I would encourage you to be thinking about that. I'd encourage you to think about, what is it about this individual that has me whipped? Or does whipped only relate to men? I don't know. But maybe there is also something about that that clearly has you kind of like somewhat vulnerable to that individual. So, Jazz, you've said, my phone being quiet now, I'm feeling like life is boring. Exactly. When we let go of the mayhem, you know what, Jazz, I'm really glad you mentioned that. Like, that's one of the things that I experienced, was like, Jesus, boy, life is really dull and it's really boring. And like Mary J. Blige sing that song, No More Drama. And I was really feeling it. But it's like, no more drama. And it's like, geez, like, not even like, my phone's just dead. Before, it was like a hotline, a hot potato. There was always a voicemail, a message, some sort of mayhem, some sort of disaster, some sort of catastrophe that was going down. Be it, anyway, we're not going in there. That one, we'll save that one for the film. That actually, when I began to clear up my life, that wasn't there. And I remember one day, like, turning my phone on and off again to make sure it was working. Like, wow, like how sad was that, you know? But that is something you need to be careful of in terms of that statement about, you know, life is boring. What it often means, especially if maybe you've been in a one-way relationship where that person's problem becomes your own, is that it's important, beneficial for you to consider, especially if in that relationship you might have been a fixer as well. If you're a fixer, give me a thumbs up, because what that may also mean is, well, you're no longer focused on their life, so then it may mean that you have to focus on yours. And actually, if you're a perpetual giver, if you're someone who's always like focused on that person's problem, let's be honest, they're often like drama filled, then the beauty of them not being in your life is, yes, it will get boring, but that's what could pave way, depending on how much you want to change your life, to you thinking about, who are you, what is your purpose, and how can you redistribute the energy that you used to channel towards Won't Commit Fred to yourself. That is what that process of boring can do if you harness it. Like, what do you love? What do you enjoy? What do you like? What could you give yourself permission to do? What dreams and aspirations do you have? Because if we're people that have often been with people who we've wanted to rescue, or people that we've needed to fix, then the benefit of that is that we don't have to work on self. it means that we work on all our energy, all our time, all our efforts go on them. And the benefit of that is that we don't have to do us, you know. So there's a massive benefit to that. So that's why potentially life can be boring, is because you're no longer distracted or consumed by their ever never ending pool of problems. So now when the calm has come and it's just you, it's now, that's why life can be boring. And that's why, for me, one of the things that I did through that process, when I was able to disentangle myself from that situation, was that I took steps to begin to think about me. Like, what do I want for my life? I've spent the past however many years like caught up in that person's drama and what they want and what they need and this, that, the other. Like, but what about me? What do I want for my life? And out of that process came Key for Change. Like, I wanted to help other people, other women, other humans going through the same situation, to inspire them. And so when I kind of hit that point, my energy began, when feeling bored or lonely, I redistributed that energy into like trying to understand who the hell I was, why I had got myself into such a tricky situation, and made myself particularly vulnerable. I really wanted to understand that. And yes, life doesn't mean that the boredom went, but what happened through that process is that I began to get what I got was, I began to get purpose. I began to get a vision for my life that was about me, and I now regard what I do, like my business, as my purpose and my calling, and that I am I'm a very privileged individual who's been able to harness an adverse situation for the greater good of others, and by virtue of that, I myself benefit. And so what does that mean for you? What could that mean for you in your life? And what do you start to think about in terms of doing that? So that, you know, there's no issue with being a heart-led person, but the challenge is what boundaries do we have in place? How do we honor ourselves when sticky situations arrive, or when someone's disrespectful, or we feel like someone's taking our kindness for weakness and our emotions are at interplay? How do we honor ourselves? And I'm like, let's be real about it. If you're not prepared to walk away when respect and trust and love are not being served, when the relationship is not healthy, when you're perpetually met with disappointment after disappointment that you have to explain away, where you start to feel embarrassed because you don't want your friends to ask because he's doing what he does, then if you dishonor yourself, if you perpetually accept that, then that's when purely going with our heart is a problem for us. And that is the benefit in those situations of trying to be logical. So that's where we start to ask ourselves questions. For example, this situation is not good for me. What is it about this situation? If I stay in this relationship, what will I be doing to my self-esteem? Because when we are purely led by our emotions, and we let our emotions govern our decision-making process, and we don't accept the writing that we see often on the wall, because we have a fantasy in our mind's eye of how the relationship should be, and then the sex is great and you get hooked back into all of that jazz, then like that's when we become our own worst enemy. And that's where purely going with our heart is actually not good for us. And this is what I explore in my workshop. And I'm very like, over the years, I kind of, you know, easily I can use my own experience, but I've seen this come up time and time again. And I think the value of that is that I've realized, like, wow, like for so many years, I thought it was just me. And now I realize, like, it's so universal, which is one of the reasons why I'm comfortable talking about my experience, in order to like demonstrate that, like I said, like like this was many years ago, like we're talking like 20 odd years ago. So I can talk about that. One, it's well removed for myself, and I believe that in me being what may be perceived as vulnerable, or you're looking like you're weak, like, nah, I'm good. It's deliberate in terms of, you know, getting other people to think about. And so that's one of the reasons why this title features in Feel Loved, is because it's just such an important topic that comes up time and time again. And so, you know, one of the benefits of not purely going with your head is purely with your heart, is that it's also important to like learn from your difficult experiences in the past and start to ask questions. Questions help us to jolt us out of our feelings and can be a helpful way to engage our logical mind. And in addition, if you're someone who just goes with your head and you're very analytical, it may mean that you are disconnected from your feelings, and that you're very much, you may even be quite one of those, like, you have a tick list of what you want specifically, and you're very rigid about what you want from a relationship. And whilst some of that can be helpful, either extreme comes with its own challenges and can be unhelpful in some of our intimate relationships. Now, if that works for you and you complement each other, it's all good. But if you're someone who's tired of repeating patterns where love hurts, which I write about why love hurts in my book, Why Love Hurts and Why Self-Love is the Key, then these are just some tactics that may help you to start to empower yourself. Because one of the fundamentals of the work I do as a psychotherapist is to encourage people to empower themselves. Because if I have a depressed person before me, then it's often likely that they'll be experiencing disempowerment in some aspect of their life. And so I'll always be curious about where is the disempowerment, and ultimately how can you empower yourself, because that is helpful to the human condition, feeling empowered, especially if you feel disempowered. Now, if you're empowered and you still feel depressed, well, then we'll have to explore whatever it is in your life. But like a basic nugget can be about exploring disempowerment. And so one of the tools that I use to help people as a part of Feel Loved is looking at the benefits and the costs of either being a heart-led person or a head-led person, and how you can begin to integrate the two so that you become a little bit more wiser, a little bit more savvy, and get your emotions just under control. Although we also know that throwing caution to our feelings can be a wonderful, momentous experience. However, if you've experienced epic highs and then had the crash and burn of the lows, then that can be, you know, particularly difficult. And if you're anything like how I used to be back in the day, then some of those like situations, you know, they can take years to get over, because, you know, we've grown attached, and it's the attachment that can be very difficult to break, even though logically we know, you know, we know that the situation is not great for us. We kind of know it in our heart, but for whatever reason, like, we always know, you know, we always know, our inner wisdom always knows. And I'm a big fan of that. Anyhow, my phone is flashing up. I'm probably cooking here because it's been going for so long. So I'm going to bring this to a close. If you're watching this on the replay, do put hashtag replay. And if my video speaks to you, if you've got any questions, please inbox me and I'll make a video for you. I won't tag you or name you. I might inbox you the video so you can have a look. But don't go through the pain alone, because that's where we become isolated and increasingly vulnerable to abuse, manipulation and control. And I know you want to live your hashtag / your best life. So don't stay alone. Just a quick one. Start zooming about it so much. Oh, blessings. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the love. I get why everybody inboxes me. I get it. I appreciate that. I am happy to take your inbox messages as ever. And don't forget, you can also get a fact-finding call from Miguel Key to explore your situation in privacy to help you, you know, to get a sense of like, okay, that's what the issue is. Now remember, the Feel Love workshop takes place on Saturday, the 28th of September. If this topic speaks to you, then do check it out. Next week, Tuesday, at the same time, we'll be doing another Facebook Live on knowing your... No, it's not knowing your worth, is it? No, it's called How to Feel Good Enough. Now, that is also another issue. When we don't feel good enough, it means that we want the bozo to validate us. And when the bozo doesn't validate us, we're going to go on campaign, make him love us. And that ain't good for our well-being, because we want to be our hashtag / best self, greatest self. Well, we want to hashtag / live our greatest. What is this term that they always use at the Maldives? If I had someone here, I could ask them, but it's just me. Anyway, you want to live your hashtag / best life. So if that speaks to you or a friend, do tag them, stay connected, and we will be exploring that next week. If you're interested in the Feel Love workshop, I'll put a comment in the links below. Connect, don't go alone, and take care of you. Because if you don't, who will?